Disclaimer: I do not own the rights of any of the videos, images, or sounds other than my own voice that will be portrayed in this video. Everything you will see is for documentary purposes only and is protected under the Fair Use Act of 1976. We as an audience love good storytelling. Movies, TV shows, books, a story with a particular order of how the plot progresses to its ending, even if the ending is good or bad. Whether that takes a film that's 90 minutes to sometimes almost 3 or 4 hours, or even 3 or 4 sequels. It could also take anywhere from 4, 6, 8, or 25 episodes across a series that could be 1 or 15 seasons long. That's a lot of storytelling which gets us excited. The more of, the longer, the better it is. It gets us to talk about shows or movies for how good those stories are told. Sometimes good stories end so poorly we can stop talking about them in such a high regard. But there's also stories that were so good, it surprises us when they end so abruptly. Then there comes the idea of the anthology. The concept of an anthology is interesting because it is the compilation of shorter stories in a particular collection, whether in a television show or a film, or even a film series. But anthology storytelling goes deeper into entertainment than just that. The radio programs of the 60s all the way back to the 30s were majority in anthology-based media. Every new broadcast telling a different story than the last. This would be the foundation building blocks for what would grow the audience's attraction to new stories coming out more consistently, no matter how long or short. And anthologies don't stop there. When you get a short story collection from one of your favorite authors, that's an anthology. Something like Stephen King's Nightmares and Dreamscapes, or J.D. Salinger's 9 Stories collection, or even Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. Video games also have anthologies. Final Fantasy has 16 main arc games, each is a different story with different main characters. One might even suggest the growth of short-form content like TikTok or Reels is a fashion of anthology-like content. It's always different, always to the point, always fast, and for the most part, exactly what an audience loves. For almost 100 years, anthologies have come and go, and it has been an everlasting concept many try to adapt. The biggest genres that benefit from anthology-based storytelling is drama, thriller, but most of all, horror. All of these genres mesh really well together, and the ability to tell a story incorporating all of these can lead to some great and entertaining content. This goes back to series like The Twilight Zone, Tales from the Crypt, Tales from the Dark Side, The Outer Limits, shows that have lasting fan bases and rewatchability that many others hope to achieve. The biggest show might be Twilight Zone, but for the modern day, the fans of the genre give praise to American Horror Story. Spawning 12 seasons and a spin-off series, it's kind of hard to beat. Then there's a series like Black Mirror, which is an anthology-based science fiction show that feeds off the fears of today's level of technology and social media. Many networks have tried to capture an audience with an anthology-based series at one given time or another. Netflix ran with the Haunted series with Hill House in 2018 and Bly Manor in 2020. Hulu had a show that ran for 2 seasons called Into the Dark, which was based around different holidays. Plenty of examples of this exist across all networks trying their hand out in anthology over the last decade. Now, in 2016, the Sci-Fi Channel threw their hat in the ring with the premiere of Channel Zero, an anthology-based supernatural horror series where the plots of the stories were based on creepypastas. What's a creepypasta? Think of it as an urban legend for the modern day. An example of a creepypasta, and probably the most popular one, is Slender Man, the tale of a tall, skeletal-looking faceless man in a suit that would pop up in photos depicting a stalker-like presence. Other stories include Jeff the Killer or The Back Rooms. All interesting tales told by anonymous users starting as early as 2007. It is within these tales that the Sci-Fi Channel looked to embody the storytelling horror of creepypastas through Channel Zero. The first season of Channel Zero, titled Candle Cove, is based on a creepypasta of the same name, written and illustrated by Chris Straub. It tells the story of a television show that only children can see, and later on in life, Those children are all grown and discussing the show that has seemingly disappeared, so it feels like a weird dream to them. The first season, in comparison to its source material, is an interpretation that dives deeper into one family's perspective of their exposure to this show and its connection to missing children during the 80s. Although this isn't the highest rated of the 4 seasons, it is the only certified fresh on Rotten Tomatoes, and by the end was still the most viewed of the entire series. The second season was titled No End House, based on a creepypasta of the same name written by Brian Russell sometime around 2008. The story revolves around a man who accepts the challenge of the No End House. It is a haunted house with 9 rooms that the challenger has to get through that get progressively worse. If the challenger makes it, they win $500. The show makes a few changes to the story, as there is no challenge aspect to it, and it more so follows the house in a magical sense as it disappears from time to time. A group of friends hear about the house, so they go to try to find it as it lands in one of its locations. The main character is also changed from a man who is addicted to drugs to a small group of younger friends, all which the story branches off to tell each one's different experiences. The other change is that the house in the show only has 6 rooms, whereas the original creepypasta has 9. Even with these changes, the reviews are flawless, solidifying it as being better than Cove. So you knew another season was coming, and that one was called Butcher's Block. It's based on a creepypasta titled Search and Rescue Woods, written by Carrie Hammond. It was originally posted in 2015 to the r/NoSleep Reddit forum, which is a prime location for a lot of creepypastas. The story follows a search and rescue officer, as he tells his tales of weird supernatural experiences he's had in the woods, including the presence of a strange staircase in the middle of a clearing, essentially leading to nowhere. The show, however, made the most changes to the story thus far, one being the main character as a young woman who is taking care of her older sister while helping a young police officer deal with strange disappearances in their town. The 4th and final season is titled The Dream Door, which is based on a creepypasta called Hidden Door, written by Charlotte Bywater. It is the most modern creepypasta the show used, coming out sometime towards the end of 2016, also posted to the r/NoSleep Reddit forum. This interpretation also made the most changes from the original story. Firstly, they're both about a married couple. However, in the creepypasta, the couple live in the house for 5 years before discovering the door, while the show depicts the couple finding the door as soon as they move in. The house is also connected to the wife's family in the show, adding most likely a little bit more character development and backstory. The creepypasta, however, sees the husband venture through the door first, where he discovers a figure in the shadow that frightens him. So he leaves the door and they call the cops, who come and there's essentially nothing in the room. That's the creepypasta, but in the show, the wife goes through the door where she discovers the character of Pretzel Jack, her childhood imaginary friend. It is then discovered that the wife has supernatural powers and is able to create living things from her imagination. These creatures enter the real world through these doors. This is a huge deviation from the original story it's adapting, yet this season is still highly rated and was extremely successful, and that is where Channel Zero leaves off. But there is so much more room to grow with this concept, so many more seasons they could have done, and to be frank, the show didn't fail. The show was massively revered as being really, really good. So what happened? Why did it end? Why was it canceled? The answer isn't complicated. It's just unfortunate. The Sci-Fi Channel is basic cable, usually part of most channel packages that come in either streaming services or cable TV bundles. It follows the same patterns of any other channel. AMC, TNT, Comedy Central, all with original content, all released following the same pattern, weekly episodes. Cable networks also make determinations for shows they keep based on viewership. When Cove hit the screens, it set the tone for what Sci-Fi was expecting out of the ratings for the seasons following. By the time Butcher's Block premiered and ended, the viewership nearly halved. This was a huge red flag, and another season was just on the horizon. So Sci-Fi made an interesting call and released season 4 both in its weekly episodic run, Then they placed all 6 episodes online available to stream whenever. An interesting strategy that did not fare well, as viewership for that season tanked even worse. Networks like this only keep shows if they reach the expectations of what they want in ratings so they can see it making money. It was bad enough that the show was not given a huge amount of money to work with from the get-go. Nick Antosca, the showrunner through all 4 seasons, has stated, "Our budget was small. We can't afford big stars," with high quotes. Which is also a major flaw many saw in the show. There were a lot of smaller name actors they could afford, but were still recognizable. But Antosca worked with what he had. By the standards of TV, our budget is like a micro budget. But by the standards of indie film, it's pretty good. So, you bring in indie film directors who are resourceful and used to working under extreme constraints, and we're able to maximize our production value. Each season from start to finish is led by a different director. Cove is directed by Greg William McNeil, who also directed a few episodes of Westworld, The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, Them, and even The Twilight Zone. No End House is directed by Stephen Piet, who went on to direct a few episodes of The Act, Briar Patch, and A Friend of the Family. All of these shows were also created by Antosca. Butcher's Block was directed by Arkasha Stevenson, who also directed an episode of Briar Patch, as well as Brand New Cherry Flavor, another series created by Antosca. The final season, Dream Door, is directed by Evan Katz, or E.L. Katz. By the time he does Channel Zero, he had directed a film called Small Crimes, he directed an episode of Scream, the TV series, and he also did a segment of the popular ABCs of Death films, being ABC of Death 2, the letter A. All of these directors seem to have the stuff to get the job done. And they did. Because I've heard very few, if any, negative things about Channel Zero. But at the end of the day, whether it be the low budget, the low ratings, or the lack of faith in the show's longevity, the cancellation of Channel Zero still seems to shock a lot of people. Because it didn't have any bumps in the road. It is highly regarded as a great show. It's just a victim of the unfortunate nature of standard television practices. That's it. That's the truest of unfortunate events ever. Now, don't get me wrong, plenty of shows have fallen victim to the wolves of the basic cable world. Channel Zero was just one of the few I know that went as far as it did and is so widely popular and enjoyable that its abrupt cancellation is quite upsetting.